Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us on Diplomatic Channel. I am Amarachi Ubani. This week, President Muhammadu Buhari is in Russia for the first Russia-Africa summit meant to strengthen relations in security, trade and investment and partnerships to enhance Nigeria's huge gas potential following Russia's success in gas exportation. The Nigerian presidency says the summit will bring fresh perspective on global issues and challenges such as nuclear technology, energy development, digital transformation, environment, technical security, mining and steel, education, agriculture, infrastructure, and development strategies. A really long list, right? Reports say that Russia has signed military agreements with 21 African countries already and has grown its trade with Africa up to $20.4 billion as of 2018. That's from $5.7 billion back in 2009. Africa's European and American partners have been wary of this relationship between Russia and its African partners following Russia's annexation of Crimea. But this will be the first Russia-Africa summit, so it is significant. It holds in Sochi, Russia, on the 23rd and 24th of October. More than 50 heads of state have been invited for the summit to be chaired by Russian President Vladimir Putin himself. I want to bring in Professor Bola Akinteriwa to talk a bit more about this. Professor Akinteriwa is the Director General of the Bolitak Center for Diplomacy and Strategic Studies of BOSIDAS. Professor, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Let's begin with your thoughts on this summit, the first Russia-Africa summit holding in Sochi.
I think it's a good development. It's welcome a development, especially when we take a close look at the agenda of the plenary session. It is expected that there will be about 28 sub-themes to be discussed. When we spy, some of the sub-themes, they are very critical. They are of particular interest to Nigeria. For instance, when you take a look at the fact that they are discussing oil and gas projects in Africa, they are looking at how to create a new environment for investments, the opportunities of Russian investments. They are talking about how to use minerals in Africa to benefit the people of Africa, especially if we want to recall the fact that Okoye-Aripo, when he was commissioner, for external affairs under the Gowonian regime, by that time he said, under no circumstance should African resources be exported to Europe to develop Europe. So Russians might have taken note of this particular position of Nigeria by now saying that, look, let us exploit African mineral resources for the people of Africa. I think from this perspective, I feel comfortable that this type of summit will be discussing, issues that are more critical. Perhaps more importantly, the first sub-theme there is on the role, of the media in Africa. Meaning now that Russia is now looking critically at the role of the media in the development of the continent. I think this one is quite significant. It's a welcome development.
So when you compare, when compared to the recent scramble for African partnership, I mean, I'm talking about the Chinese who've been here for the past few years, the Europeans, also Americans and so on. It would appear that Russia is only coming in to protect what other countries have already have, which is established partnerships with Africa. Do you think that is the case, Russia coming in late to the party just because everyone is moving in this direction?
Well, I wouldn't say late, and I wouldn't say it's early. I think that we should put the discussion within the framework of the emerging new world order and the emerging Cold War. You discover that America has come up with the policy of America first. In this case, all countries, especially the other major powers, will need to respond to that particular policy. The French are on record to have started this one country versus the whole continent business. It used to be a Franco-African summit, but we knew and we still know that by that time it started basically with the Francophones. So before the Anglophone countries, the Arabophone countries joined. But in the context of Russia, it is an improvement on all other summits. It's an improvement, especially in terms of coverage of issues involved.
Yeah, and Russia is expected, according to other analysts, to say that Russia is expected to re-emerge with its strongest ties to the continent since the fall of the Soviet Union by the end of the summit. What does Africa get out of this, and what do you make of the statement about Russia re-emerging the strongest? Do you think this is Russia's, this is a filibuster, I guess, for Russia missing the Soviet Union? And do you think we would have fair partnerships on both sides?
Well, it's a factor of the bargaining power of Russia and African people. Partnership, yes. Give and take and give. But what is it that we do have that we are going to give in this case? Is more or less, for me, a vertical partnership. It is not a horizontal one. In other words, we are going to gain if our strategic calculations are well put in place. African people are not on record, and most of our involvements have always been ceremonial. They do not always address, especially even the 28 themes, the issues being addressed. You can take a look at the speeches that will be made. Egyptian president is currently the African Union chairperson.
Yes.
But now there's going to be a special speech by him which focuses on Russian investments in Egypt. But they are not talking about the generality. You will see. Go and look at, let's wait for the speeches of our own president and all others. You will discover that they will not address all the critical issues that will benefit them, but they will be talking grosso modo on general things.
It's interesting you say that because, even listening to the president's speech at the UN, I think the President Buhari tried to draw in, tried to relate, some of these issues to Nigeria. What should be our position, though, in this partnership? Are we leader on the continent, or do we also, devise a much better a partnership with Russia?
I think we should look at the question at two levels: multilateral and bilateral. The multilateral one is at the level of the African Union itself. It will be difficult for Nigeria to operate outside of the multilateral framework on the basis of the speech that Abdel Fattah, the Egyptian leader, will be making. In other words, there's a collective approach in terms of partnering in this case. But I think that at the bilateral level, the Nigerian government must emphasize and must support and make the environmental conditions in Nigeria favorable to the Russians coming back to help revive, the Ajaokuta steel industry. So the Russians have shown keen interest in coming back to help revive, and then they will manage the place for a time to recoup their investments, their profits, after which they will now then hand over the place. Then we are signing another agreement with them in terms of military assistance for the purposes of dealing, coping, neutralizing Boko Haram insurgency. I think if we are able to do this, then the other third problem, which is the factor of Maurice Okolo. Maurice Okolo was the one in 2011 who bailed the Embassy of Nigeria, the federal government of Nigeria, from unnecessary embarrassment. The amnesty program, under which 95 Nigerians were sent to Russia for training, the students were not paid. You know, they were not able to pay their tuition fees. And what happened was that Maurice Okolo had to lend about 65,000 US dollars to the embassy to prevent their deportation to Nigeria. But since that time, the federal government has not refunded the man, and he wants to take the government to court, and probably information has given us a pointer that there will be massive protests. Africans will come and demonstrate, which means that they can thoroughly embarrass President Muhammadu Buhari on this particular occasion. I think that this particular factor of living up to expectation, doing agreement, keeping to the spirit and respecting it, I think Nigeria's foreign policy should adopt that as a part of its discipline. If we do that one, partnership can be meaningful and constructive in the foreseeable future.
Professor Bola Akitarinwa, always a pleasure speaking with you on Diplomatic Channel and all other platforms. Thanks again for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Let's take a quick check on other discussions in diplomatic circles. U.S. troops have crossed into Iraq as part of the withdrawal from northeast Syria ordered by U.S. President Donald Trump, which opened the way for Turkish troops to launch an offensive against Kurdish fighters in the area. Reporters said they saw more than 100 vehicles crossing from the northeast tip of Syria, where Turkey has agreed to pause its offensive for 5 days under a deal agreed between Washington and Ankara. The truce expires late on Tuesday. Turkish President Recep Erdogan has warned that Ankara will resume its military assault in Syria when the deadline expires if the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces have not pulled back from its proposed safe zone area spanning the border. He says Turkey will set up a dozen observation posts in the planned safe zone. A witness in the region said Turkish forces had already begun establishing 2 such posts on Sunday, drawing criticism from Iran. North Korea's Vice Minister of the People's Armed Forces has been in Beijing to attend the Jiangshan Forum, giving a speech about the conflict on the Korean peninsula. This month, North Korea issued a veiled threat about ending the freeze in long-range missile testing amid continued economic sanctions and pressure aimed at pushing it to give up its nuclear and ballistic missiles programs. North Korea has conducted missile tests in recent months, including that of a submarine-launched ballistic missile, and broke off the latest working-level nuclear talks with the U.S. in early October. The top negotiator for the talks blamed the U.S. for the breakdown and said Washington brought nothing to the negotiating table. Pyongyang has so far stuck to a freeze in testing of nuclear weapons and intercontinental ballistic missiles that has been in place since 2017 and allowed for 3 meetings between its leader, Kim Jong-un, and U.S. President Donald Trump since last year. One of the most prominent figures against independence for the Spanish region of Catalonia, Albert Rivera, has staged a counter-protest after a week of separatist unrest and called for an end to the violence. Rivera, head of the pro-unionist Ciudadanos party, told hundreds of flag-waving supporters that Spain's acting socialist government was not doing enough to end the chaos sparked by the jailing of separatist leaders. Demonstrators attending the rally said they were there to support the Catalans and show them they're not alone. They also greeted police officers and thanked them for handling the situation in Catalonia. When we come back after the break, is the United States entangling itself into more conflict areas? We'll take a look at President Trump's plan for those soldiers leaving northern Syria. Stay with us.